This webinar, as all of our webinars this year, are sponsored by Sedgwick Brand Protection, and we appreciate their support for these webinars. And thank you all very much. Thank you for attending. When we're thinking of topics to cover, some of these are narrow, some of them are very broad, some of them are hard to cover, tons of material in an hour, but we'll give you a good start and a good introduction to a subject if you need that. And this subject is a huge topic. All the post-sale activities, basically, we're going to focus on the beginning part of it, but we'll get to the end part where you make a decision about what to do. But we're going to start off with the call centers and how you receive information, how you evaluate it, and what decisions you make. So we will not get to everything that that maybe you'd like to hear, but we want to get a good start on outlining the topic for you and letting you know what the important points are. And we've got three wonderful speakers that are going to be talking to us today. Larry Bell, who's the head of product safety at BSH Home Appliances. Mark Hickok, who's the head of product safety at Milwaukee Electric Tool. Jason Hertzberg is a corporate vice president at Exponent and spends lots of his time helping companies analyze post-sale failures and incidents and try to figure out what to do. So a perfect group to give us inside, outside expertise on this. As Lawden said, that we will all be looking at questions that are coming in and try to identify those that would be of interest to the broader audience. I may respond to a question that I think is specific to you as an individual. I'll try to do that. At the very end, we'll have a slide at the end where you'll have email addresses and ways to ask further questions after the program. So feel free to do that. We're not going to get to everything I think that you might all be interested in, but we'll try. In any event, the subject is huge because it deals with everything post-sale. And the particular problem we have is that every company is organized a little bit differently. I used to be an in-house lawyer at my last company, Emerson Electric. We had 140 divisions. So when you're talking about post-sale safety analysis, are you doing it at corporate? Are you doing it in the divisions? How do you do that? So that's one way companies can be organized with multiple divisions with lots of different product lines. And then other companies have a much narrower focus in their industries and product lines and products. And that would be a little bit different way to do it. So when we think about how do we do things post-sale, we're looking at it from the standpoint of what's particular to your company in your industry, your risk tolerance, and organizational structure. So it's very different, which is why we can't really give you the exact way to do all of these things because it's very particular to a company. Now, this is a really important topic because if you do it poorly, it can result in accidents, result in near misses near misses in the accidents, but also those that you miss. You don't identify those. Regulatory problems, inadequate recalls or inadequate corrective actions, bad results in product liability cases. There are all kinds of really bad things that can happen if you do poorly in this area. Now, in my experience, which spans many, many years, both as an in-house lawyer and an outside safety and product liability counselor, most companies I've dealt with do a really poor job in this area. Not intentionally, it's just because it's really hard to do. And it's gotten worse over the years because of the internet and websites and social media and all the different ways that we receive information. So we're not talking, we're going to focus on call centers initially here, but there's so many other ways information can come in that it is much harder to really get a handle on this information and try to identify the substantive correct information and separate it from the information that is incorrect or or coming from different places that are not reliable. So we need to figure out a way to get information, identify where it's coming from, and then make a determination. Where do we follow up? Which incidents, which calls, which emails, which website postings identify potential safety issues? And of course, we're focusing on safety, not quality or customer satisfaction issues. And then what do we do about it? So that's what we're going to try to focus on, try to figure out how to filter out the information that we really need to follow up on, and ignore the things that are, postings from disgruntled customers or competitors or plaintiffs' attorneys. They're known to do postings too like that. So could we ignore those kinds of things? And we're not going to discuss CPSC reporting specifically. We've talked about that before, but their methodology of evaluating risk after an incident occurs is a useful one to consider, of course, in developing your own post-sale risk analysis program that you're doing. Now, we will, because we're not going to get to everything here, and there's a lot more information out there, we'll be posting articles and other things that we can immediately identify that relate to this area. So the slides and articles will be posted on the SPSP website in the archives. So you can take a look at those. And this webinar is being videotaped. The video will be posted also. The link to the video will be posted on the website. So for those people in your company who haven't been on this today, they can see both the webinar and see the reference material that we'll provide later on. So here are the topics we're going to talk about. Hopefully we'll get to all of them, but we may or may not, depending on how we're doing, but that's okay. And we kind of divided it into three topics: call centers, then once you get the information, how do you analyze it? And then how do you decide what to do? So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Larry Bell, we're going to have a lead speaker, and then the other two speakers will kind of chime in at the end when the lead speaker is done. So all three of you will have an opportunity to comment on every topic here. So anyway, without further ado, let me turn it over to Larry to talk about this first topic.
All right. Thanks so much, Ken. Again, my name is Larry Bell, and I want to start out with this statement that the views and opinion are those of my own and not those of BSH Home Appliances. So let's talk about the post-incident analysis. Well, first of all, why do you even want such a system? Why is it necessary? Well, in the scheme of things today with CPSC, as far as our reporting obligation, it's essential that you have a system in place where you can immediately identify problems and start to evaluate those problems to determine the potential severity and to determine whether you might have a reportable issue, because your obligations start when the person that should appreciate the significance of the issue learns about the situation, and CPSC will view that as the company being notified when that person receives that information. So it's important that you do have a good system in place where everyone understands how that process works, especially those people who are on the front lines, being your call center people. So in order to do a post-sale incident analysis, you first need this system in place that will enable you to monitor what's going on in the field. So I'll speak about how to set that up, and primarily through one of the main sources, which is the call center, which many companies have. But there is a movement where companies are gravitating away from call centers and making the front line being someone that is sort of virtual behind a chat box who's talking their way through any problems or complaints that you might have versus allowing you to speak to a direct agent. So most customer service organizations within your company will have one of these, one source or two sources of information where you interact with customers. One being the call center, which is where your voice interaction occurs. The next could be your social media. Most companies, social media is sort of an additional source, but it is becoming an increased source of information for a lot of companies where customers prefer to just go air their issues out on social media. And then if you're doing a good job monitoring these social media platform, you pick up on these type of complaints and you try to direct those customers back into your call center where you can basically better understand their situation and remedy the issue. Another one is what I mentioned, a live chat. But these are credible, still credible source of information, and where customers will describe their problem to you. Also, emails another form, and IVRs can be important if set up properly, especially if you don't have a call center, to help direct customers to experts in that particular area. So if a customer does have an issue with a particular type of product, you want that customer talking to people who are very knowledgeable of that product and could aid the customer in remedying their situation. So on this diagram, what I show here is these are your listening channels. These are the channels where you're listening for things that customers may say that could indicate whether you particularly have a potential safety issue. And what you want to do is you want to set up a process where you're listening for certain keywords, words that I'll get to a little bit later. But through these listening channels, this will enable you, first of all, to immediately determine what the problem might be, and enable you to determine what type of intermediate actions you want to take. Because one of those actions you may want to have in place is you may want to just exchange the product instead of repairing the product. Oftentimes, if you repair the product in the field, you don't receive good intelligence from the technician that went out to service the product. So it could behoove you to exchange that product, bring it back into your lab, and do your investigation from there. And that's just your reaction off the first case. But then if you continue to get other reports in, you want to have a structure where you are collecting data from the field and you're clustering this data based on the type of complaints, based on the type of failure modes. And you want to be able to develop enough information in this database to allow you to monitor the trends and ideally look for emerging issues within your data. Because a lot of times customers cry wolf, and really, you know, we're talking something minor. So not really a safety issue. However, they're saying certain words during this call where you really don't know one way or the other whether it's really a safety issue. So you want to have a system that will allow you to detect emerging issues. So with that, so what questions do I ask? Well, when you receive information from customers, whether it's verbal, you initially want to ask questions like your basic questions. You want to get the customer's contact information, first of all. You want the model, serial number, date of the incident, when and where did the incident occur? And it's very important, as I mentioned, that you listen to what the customer tells you when you ask them about the incident and the occurrence, because they're now describing what they experienced with the product in very much detail. Some customers will exaggerate, of course, but you want to note exactly what the customer is saying, because there could be a repeat pattern. Other customers may describe the problem the same way. So you want to at least get those keywords noted in the complaint file, so that when your safety team or your quality team evaluates that data, they can pick up on those particular words and then create categories on them. So these type of words is what we call what I call trigger words. And the trigger words can be used to help your call center detect these issues while they're on the call. So you want your program set up to where you can train your call center people to be familiar with these words. You could post these, they keep these words posted at their desk. You could put them on a monitor within their call center, just so they're familiar with the types of words that's being described by consumers that could indicate a potential safety risk. And this will really help you tremendously to categorize and cluster and communicate these reports to your engineers. So you want to know how and when to escalate as well. So when setting up your list of trigger words, you'll base this off the type of products that you sell. And you also base it off the common hazards that can occur with those products. Every product can be different. The list I showed you is an example of some keywords that are common in home appliance industry, but your list of keywords may be different. So if you're not sure which type of hazards to start with, then you bring your engineers involved and you ask them, hey, what kind of hazards can occur with this product? And you sort of develop your list from there. You can also review CPSC public database or the NIST database for potential hazards and injuries on similar like products. So that will also enable you to develop that list. And you also want to have your system set up, whether it's an automated system or a manual system, you want it set up so that it will notify people within your safety group. And I say safety, but it could be quality group in some other smaller organizations, but in large organizations, most companies have an independent safety group to monitor these type of cases. So you want to have this system set up to where it will notify and inform the right persons that a complaint was received that had these keywords, so they can collect that data and down the road continue the ongoing monitoring of that data as they investigate this single incident. Because as I mentioned, a lot of cases, there's a lot of noise in there. So those are some of the things you want to do with your post-monitoring process. So I will now allow one of the other gentlemen to speak on.
Okay, Mark, you want to jump in first?
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree a lot. Great information, Larry. Couple of things that I found as we set up ours, I think a lot of things Larry said are exactly right as far as what we want to get into the training. But one of the things I found is if you don't understand your call center well enough, it's really hard to actually get in and do the training. You got to get in there and understand their structure, maybe the level of understanding that the people that you're having answer the phone calls actually have. You know, you could have the greatest list of questions, and if those folks don't really understand what's going on, the output of that may not be great. So one of the things we like to do is see if we can get in and try to do something I think Larry kind of spoke to, is if you've got multiple areas or something, can you get them to a specialist? So do these trigger words or do certain activities trigger that escalation to somebody else? And now you've got a product specialist and maybe it's specialized by category. So they can actually get a better read on what's going on. And when we do those, you know, then we do look at product specific issues. I will say one thing as well that I think we missed early in my career, and I'm glad we do it now, is we actually think about this issue in product development. So as we're developing a product, we spend time thinking about what are the things that can go wrong as part of our risk assessment, our hazard analysis. But as we go through that, we actually start thinking about quality control issues, question and answers for call centers, question and answers for marketers or field staff. But we start to try to set the table, because, you know, things may happen. And we start doing what we can early so that as we get to the call center when the product launches, we've had an opportunity to brief those people who take the call on these key issues, get them some training and get them some information before the calls start actually rolling in. I think it's something we found to be it's successful, and I think it's something that really goes a long way when you can, is to start to anticipate these. And then to the extent you can, formalizing some of those questions so that there's a consistency across the questions that they're asking, so that the answers start to come in a little bit more consistent as well, so you can aggregate data and do a little bit more on the next side. So I don't know, Jason, if you got some thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, so I actually, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I got booted. Give me 1 second here. Okay. You can hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So I got booted at the last minute. I'm not sure exactly what you finished up with, Mark, but I did want to add a couple things that hopefully weren't touched on while I was gone. I think that providing the staff with the right background with regard to CPSA, CPSC requirements, consequences for the company in terms of civil and criminal, understanding that backdrop is important in terms of the overall importance of their function. I think that, providing actual examples of scenarios that deserve elevation can be a very important and valuable tool. Having training with the products on hand. I mean, I've seen certain companies basically have hands-on kind of sessions with the different types of products so they can use the products and understand how they function, how they can fail, just at a very high level. Just, you'd be surprised at how many people working in a customer service function maybe don't have as much experience or any experience with the particular products that they're kind of armed with of capturing information about. Establishing the documentation, the implementation, and the efficacy of the training part as part of a product safety compliance program is super critical. So it's one thing to have a documented training process and even to implement the training process, but the efficacy aspect is something where I've seen companies really fall down. And I think that introducing things like quiz questions, for example, at the end of a training session to demonstrate an understanding of the training materials, and for example, not being authorized to perform those functions in that servicing role until you pass the test is a way to demonstrate that efficacy and show a good understanding. And those quiz questions can involve case studies, for example, where you actually walk them through different scenarios of, hey, this comes in, these words are mentioned, or this scenario is presented. What do you do with that information?
Yeah, you said something interesting, Jason, that I'd love to tap into as well. When you go down, we call it, I like to call it the so what of the matter. As I'm giving the training, it's like, give them something to grab onto. The so what, why do I care? And I think that's so critical because folks will listen to a lot of things and things can go on for an hour. But the so what and the examples sometimes are a great example, a way to put the so what of the matter.
Yeah.
One of the things we push a lot on our company, and I'm sure a lot of companies do, is put that customer first, right? We're not trying to reduce liability. We're trying to reduce injuries. Because if I don't have injuries, I don't have liability concerns as much. So can we do that? And that's why we're here. And if we get good information, we can be part of that and making those folks feel like part of the team and know that they're understanding what's going on and they have the so what of the matter. It seems to go a long way.
And one last thing is there are different triggers in terms of like how people who are receiving the training, it kind of what resonates with them. So some people, yes, we have to make the world safe. We can't have people be injured. I mean, that's going to resonate with a lot of people, hopefully, that they want to make the world a safer place. But in addition to that, other people may resonate more to, hey, if we don't do a good job of this, we could be shut down from the standpoint of we can't sell our products into this marketplace anymore, for example, or the brand reputation could really be hit where we're not successful as a company anymore, which really relates directly to you, valued employee. So there are different ways to kind of present the importance of it. Again, whether it's brand reputation, whether it's safety, whether it's ability to sell products and just, job security, all sorts of different ways, but it doesn't really matter. You just have to be able to, the relaying the importance of their function, however best resonates with the staff is a critical element that I think is sometimes also forgotten.
Let me jump in a couple of thoughts here. This is so critical because this falls into the garbage in, garbage out concept. If you don't get good information, accurate information, then you're going to be led astray, either underestimating risk or overestimating risk. So this is really very critical. And I get concerned that that you're giving too much responsibility to call center people who aren't trained in this area. And where really all the safety issues that can be initially identified by the trigger words, it really needs to go to a human being who's trained in this area, who knows exactly what questions to ask. Secondly, the trigger words are going to evolve over time. You can only do so much initially, But it's going to change, and you need to really sit there and evaluate the calls that are coming in or the emails that are coming in and identify new trigger words that are being used. In the playground equipment area where I've done some work, I mean, we'd have kids falling off of the playground, and one kid had a headache, and the same accident happened, and the parents said that they had a traumatic brain injury. Well, the call center people, they just write this stuff down. And, when you have to produce this to the CPSC and it looks like you've got traumatic brain injuries, are these really traumatic brain injuries, or was it a headache that went away in a day? Did they seek medical care or not? And certainly with children's products, parents are very emotional about this, and they will tend to overstate things, even more than just kids' products. For some reason, appliances or cell phones always seem to explode in people's faces when in fact they don't really explode. So people tend to overstate these things. And I think it's very tricky for somebody who's very annoyed with the company and very mad about something or other, and then try to really penetrate that and try to figure out exactly what happened without making it look like you're trying to blame them. So I really think that the trigger words need to be carefully identified, and the call center folks and people evaluating the information coming in need to really understand how do they penetrate the words that are being used and really try to figure out exactly what happened. So, and the other thing Larry said, I certainly believe engineers should be involved in helping develop the trigger words and other things, because they're involved in doing the pre-sale risk assessment. And so this post-sale risk analysis is really the same thing. I mean, we're identifying things that we thought of and trying to identify things we didn't think of that could be risks. So I think that's really important. With that said, let me just throw in one other thing here. The CPSC is real big on social media. They really want you, the manufacturer, to monitor social media. And other than, things like not your social media necessarily, but things like, Amazon product reviews. Should you be reviewing those for your products? I think so. There could be websites being set up of consumers who buy your products through blogging or social media. Certainly in children's products, they do that. So you want to identify the websites and social media where they're talking about your products and try to then identify that information. So even if it's not being sent to you, information that's being posted will be deemed to be within your knowledge because it is available to you if you look for it. So with that said,
to that point, Ken, Mary asked that kind of a question in the chat. And I think one of the things that we look at is, if we're posting to things, if we're meeting with bloggers or we're meeting with influencers or there's probably a great place to start listening as well. So I think there's this opportunity where when you're out there doing it, that's probably a great place to start and kind of get your arms. So we like to talk to our marketers. What do they understand? And that's sometimes a great place to start.
Okay, so can we turn to the second topic here? Let's see, let me just give me a second here.
Ken, while you're turning, just one comment to add on that social media part. Your goal needs to be to get that customer off social media and into your call center. You don't want to go back and forth with consumers on an issue on social media. It may not be a good idea, and it may grow wings and become most popular comments, as people, aim to increase their likes. You don't want to have that happen with you.
Okay.
Can you do that, Larry? Do you try to use like private chats and reach out direct to folks and try to get them in to have a conversation?
Yes. Yeah. It's better to have that conversation offline than in the public eye.
Okay, let me turn to the second topic in red. Jason?
Sure. So, basically at a high level, the key is to make sure you do have a formal process for elevating safety concerns from customer service or complaint intake sources to the entity that's responsible for investigating these concerns. This could be a product safety department, like Larry said, it could be quality control, it could be sustaining engineering department, that everyone, receives appropriate training for, their particular roles in the company's compliance program. There will be case-by-case aspects that may come into play, but having a basic framework that you can reference and show regulators to demonstrate due diligence in a deliberate approach to safety is important. I think the way that I've kind of described it to clients when talking about, these types of questions is, management and staff should constantly ask themselves this uncomfortable question. And the question is, if you got a call today and there was a fatality, God forbid, that resulted from a failure of your product, are you comfortable with what is currently in your file? Would you be viewed as being diligent, or would you be easily second guessed? And if you kind of keep that chilling question in your mind as you make decisions as to whether you're going to undertake an investigation, what that investigation is going to entail, how much effort you're going to take to getting a product back, to look into it and try to get at the underlying root cause. It's a good question to ask yourself theoretically at the end of each day, to say, am I leaving the file in a good place, in the database in a good place? So establishing a structure where you've designated and trained an individual and possibly other key individuals who can, in the words of the CPSC, and I think Larry mentioned this, appreciate the significance of the safety issue and identify who has the, quote, authority to act in terms of reporting. I mean, that's an important part. So those are very high level kind of things. If we get more granular in terms of my comments, I mean, certainly you need to be collecting the right information from all available channels, and Larry mentioned a whole bunch of those. Certainly, I'm not going to go and repeat all those, but there's a lot of stuff coming in from different directions, and as Ken mentioned, basically garbage in, garbage out. Are you getting the right questions and data that are being captured? One of the questions that comes about that I see as being a problem is, are all of the input channels captured and stored in one database that can be seen as a dashboard or as a whole? So yes, things are coming in differently, but if they're not pulled together and looked at in a dashboard, one place, you can have a lot of potentially incomplete information to make informed decisions on. So one of the problems that I've seen is that there's variability. There can be variability in customer service information that's provided, in contact information that's provided in user manuals, for example, which can send customers to different places. Or maybe there's no clear contact information that's provided in certain manuals or information that comes with products, which forces customers to the chat rooms or to marketplace reviews. And again, that can lead to confusion as well. There's also the challenge of companies operating with disparate databases and then seeing the big picture, as I said. So I've had situations where even very large established companies store complaint information that comes in from, let's say, the warranty period, from like year one. Let's say it's a 1-year warranty, and you have all that information of complaints that come in within that first year in one database that's captured in a very deliberate way with filtered keywords, and all that stuff is filtered down, and you can see what's going on there. And you come to a conclusion that, hey, things are looking good, not seeing much coming back, and therefore nothing to see here, nothing to act on in terms of launching an investigation. But then when I start asking the questions of, all right, this product's been around for more than a year, it's been around for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, where's the rest of that data? In other words, the data coming in with people complaining about issues after the warranty period is expired. And in many cases, or at least the cases I've seen, that information is actually stored in a separate database and maybe even fielded by different people. And when I've run into situations where that new information comes to me and I start seeing trends that are suggestive of an age-related issue. If you're familiar with the bathtub curve, you have infant mortality, and then you can have normal failure. And then at some point, the bathtub comes up again, and you can have age-related failures that happen, whether it's from fatigue or corrosion or other types of wear and tear. Anyway, I've had situations where when you pool that information together with the warranty information, it paints a very different picture. And you may start seeing that you have a lot more risk than you thought you had by different teams looking at different sets of information. So that's something I wanted to make sure that the siloing effect of safety information, not on purpose, but the siloing information can prevent companies from seeing the whole picture as it relates to fires or near misses or things like that. We've talked about, keywords, elevation terms, things like that. I think that one of the points to mention along the lines of, and I think Larry had a great summary of the types of information you're going to get that's going to change depending on the types of products or product categories. But the interpretation is something that really needs to be chased down in terms of deciding whether you want to get products back and you want to do a failure analysis. The term fire, right? Even if you filter for a term fire, for example, fire can mean 10 different things, right? It could be melt, smoke, smell, sparks, sustained flame, flash, a sound, right? It can mean someone trying to get another product because they're just trying to use that word to further their, get a new model, without having to pay all sorts of reasons. So being able to drill down and try to figure that out either through video, through pictures, through answering the right questions, or in some cases, if this is kind of like the first thing that you're seeing that's coming back in the pictures or the description looks a bit suspect, like for example, our carpet was charred and you see a picture of charred carpeting, that is probably sufficient enough for you to say, you know what, we should try to get this product back. We should look at this thing to see that there's physical information, physical evidence that's corroborating the story of fire. And that's the kind of situation where we will launch an investigation and run that to ground and maybe do your own internal testing with exemplar products or bring in an outside third party to not run the risk of a my baby syndrome problem that you might have with certain engineers who design the product and are not thinking about things quite as objectively as maybe they should. But that may be the kind of situation where you have to look at things in a case-by-case basis, see what the physical evidence suggests or presents to you. If there are corroborating aspects that suggest that it might be a near miss or there might be an actual incident, then yes, then these are things that would certainly launch an investigation in my mind. Now, it doesn't mean that, clearly if you have an actual injury with medical attention and or property damage that, a claim is filed with an insurance company or whatnot, those are clearly things that you have to take extremely seriously and you have to chase down, and you really want to get the product back or be involved in an inspection if an attorney or an insurance company is involved. But I think Ken mentioned this earlier, but you can't just limit yourself to that. The near misses and the things that where someone isn't injured or property damage doesn't occur doesn't mean that you don't do anything and that you couldn't frankly have a recall in your hands. There are recalls that happen that I've been involved in where there are no consequences and there are no severe injuries to date because it's just something that's a latent defect that is very likely to occur and to result in a problem or an injury. I remember my days looking at plate glass and what's called, inclusions in the glass because of a poor treatment of the glass could result in particulates in the glass that can grow over time and result in shattering of plate glass windows, for example. Now, you may not have any glass windows that are shattering in office buildings or residences up until the time that you realize that there's a problem with the quality of your glass. But if you know that they're in there and you know what happens to these, I believe the nickel sulfide inclusions that can grow over time and result in stresses and cause a spontaneous, fracture of glass, then you probably should take some action, right? So that's an example where you just don't need injuries and events to occur to necessitate some action. Performing trend and data analysis on quality issues and complaints and return data to try to spot potential safety issues before they manifest themselves can also be a powerful tool to get ahead of things. So for example, let's say your post-sale safety professional or personnel are beginning to see a bunch of failed products that are attributed to a failed capacitor in your product, and they categorize them as quality issues. Well, if this is spotted and elevated to engineering, and they find that these capacitors can actually fail catastrophically and have the potential to ignite some nearby combustibles within your product, well, that's worthy of further investigation to see whether you could have a scenario where you have ignition of your product, for example. So back to the formal process in terms of returned units, I mean, having a process by which you're requesting these units and that you're following up with customers to get these units is very important to avoid unnecessary delays. Offering bounties or incentives for people and obviously, return labels, as well as, replacing with a new product. These are ways to incent them to give you the product back and to analyze them. There are cases where, companies may say, hey, can you send us the product back? And then they say, no, I don't feel like it. And then that's the end of it. That's not good enough as far as the CPSC is concerned, as far as your company is concerned. You have to give them an incentive to get that back so that you can have that information and do a proper analysis when you want that instant unit for analysis. You can't just reach out once and then they say no, and then that's it. That doesn't look very good from a corporate due diligence standpoint. Instant units are always gold to the investigations that I run, especially when they're completely unaltered from their incident condition. And unless they're extensively damaged, and even when they are, some information can often be gleaned. Thermal damage patterns, electrical measurements of components, looking at fracture surfaces. But even if there's absolutely nothing that can be gleaned because it's literally a burned up mess of residue, it can be valuable also to examine the incident scene. In the case of a fire, sending a certified fire investigator to look at damage patterns and see whether the product was in fact the source of the fire, for example. There can be a lot of value in doing that, in testing exemplar units, as I said, or even getting other returned units that you pull back or that you get back for other reasons to look for signs of maybe a latent failure in those products. So, as a technical expert, charged with performing these investigations, obviously the information gathering is a very important part of things in terms of user usage patterns. One of the things that I do mention that is often not captured in customer service information is, was there in fact intervention? Did the customer unplug it? Did they put water on it? Did they do something to stop the event, or did it come to its natural end? That can be an important part of a decision-making process as to whether we have a safety issue or not. I think that's probably enough to start things off. I'm cognizant of the time, so I'll hand it off to Mark and Larry to chime in.
Okay. Yeah, Larry, you want to chime in?
Yeah, so I'll just add a few points. So in addition to what Jason had said, when you set up your system to analyze this post-sale information, you don't want to wait for a pattern of defect to occur in the data. You just don't want to look at incidents coming in and then trying to establish, okay, is my PPM getting higher, et cetera. You basically want to have that system in place with first priority is to try to obtain the first or second occurrence. It's worthy to send a technician out to take an initial look, but if you don't get the information or a good understanding from that first repair, the second time it occurs, you want to have that product coming back to your possession, or you want to go to the product itself, depending on what type of product we're talking about. If you're talking about a refrigerator, for example, oftentimes it's not so easy to just pack those up and ship them to you and have it at your door the next day, but you can hop on the flight and get to the customer and see the product within its environment to give you a more broader understanding of the failure, so that you can make a quick decision. So basically, with that said, you want to stay in front of your issues and not behind your issues. You don't want to just collect data until you have 50 incidents reported to your company before you act. It's better to be in front of that. As soon as you get the first or second case, try to get a good in-depth understanding of what it is and what it isn't. And also, I want to say that incipient failures are even more important than the actual manifested failure itself. So if you're in an electrical product industry, it's not enough to just only collect the fire damage products. Those ones where you have an initial failure where the customer said, well, something smoked, but you also have cases where you know that there was an actual fire. The one that smoked is more important because now you don't have as much damage and you can more easily identify the origin of the problem. So those are some things to keep in mind in your data analysis.
Okay, Mark?
Thank you. Yeah.
Great.
I said to go on with that, we mentioned it before, but we kind of set the table for some of this again on the front end of the development. So we know critical components, we know critical to quality, we know things that we're relying on. So let's say it's a clutch, and if the failure of that clutch would transmit torque that could throw someone off a ladder, that's really important to understand. So we're going to set up monitoring of that ahead of time. So we're going to be looking for those types of things. Similar when you're buying components, when we're out buying components from a plastic molder, polycarbonate, if you over process it can get brittle. So if you're using those for guards, that might be really interesting, because if they make the polycarb wrong, your guard actually won't be a guard, it'll become shrapnel. So things like that. So do you have quality control? Are you seeing those, and are you monitoring those pieces? So you may not have an experience of a broken guard or a blown clutch, but you might have process capability or process problems that you could get one. It could be the near miss or the things that you're not hearing about. Another thing that I know they brought up is, as you go through your investigation, often you get pictures, you get videos from the customer. Look at those very carefully, spend some time on those, making sure that they make sense and stuff. But one thing I often see is the condition of the suspect product may tell me something, but the environment also tells me a lot. So then as I go and ask for some things, I actually might ask for their other product. Like if it's a battery fire, like, can I have your other batteries? Can I have your charger? Can I have some things like that? Because you might learn things from that environmental exposure that the others haven't experienced yet. You might see things going on in the charger where there's some compromise because of corrosion, dust, what have you. So those things can be really important to think about. And I think Jason brought it up, sometimes it's dangerous to get something. You can't get it back. Well, then get on a plane, get a person with your company's eyes, go out and see it, do what you can, because at some point you're going to need to know this stuff. If someone's securing it as part of a legal proceeding, then attend the inspection. But do what you can to get your eyes and you get your qualified people on that so that they're getting really good information. We've actually got a small tiger team of battery people, let's say. So if something hits the fan, I know the battery folks that we got to get to, and we can get those out there to spend some time, and we can get some really good detail. And it's not because we're trying to defend ourselves. We really want to know.
Yeah.
And then those folks actually have a great benefit of taking it back to their new product development process and learning from that. And now you've got an advocate for that learning to be put into development and to try and avoid it again. So I think things like that go really deeply into this.
Yeah, Mark, that's a great point. And that's a lot of companies, I think, instead of viewing this as a burden in terms of, getting this information and obviously dealing with the safety issue, which is super, super critical, there is an added benefit, a bonus to it. And that is you can take that knowledge, incorporate that knowledge into your new product development to make it better and safer and create part of your knowledge database with those lessons learned and that information that you glean that you may not be able to identify upfront doing a DFMEA, a design failure modes and effects analysis, as you're making the first of the type of a product. You may just not have the ability to know everything. And that's okay, especially as we get into innovative products, which are trickier and trickier to predict every single thing that can happen. So
absolutely. And I'll tell you, and I don't think you can underestimate the importance of that advocacy on the backside. We talked about the call center folks having the so what of the matter. I think sometimes our engineers need to see that. They're brilliant people. They do some great work, but seeing the result of one of these things, the what could have happened on paper is much different than seeing the catastrophic result of a fire or something like that. And getting those folks understanding this also kind of gives you that advocacy back, so you can drive that into your continuous improvement programs for products and your future development.
Okay, we're going to move to topic 3 real briefly. We got 10 minutes to go. Mark, I'm going to give you 5 minutes on this, but before you do that, I want to advocate the call center folks or the engineers also, when they're doing the investigation, try to find out if the problem is that the consumer misunderstood or was misled by something in the warnings and instructions, because that's something that can be easily fixed. And, we need to understand we're trying to write the best we can for consumers, but we're not the consumer. And so we can easily use words that may be misunderstood or put in the wrong place or whatever. So to the extent that that's what's causing a problem, we need to identify that so we can fix it either going forward or maybe in the field. by sending out new instructions to consumers. So don't just focus on the design. There are other things going on that could create the problem. So Mark, I want you to do, and we'll just do 5 minutes there. There are a couple of questions. We'll do those in the last 5 minutes, and I'll probably take those. I'll just try to answer them quickly so we get to everything here. So go ahead, Mark.
Absolutely. So the last part we want to talk about is some of the decision process. And again, at the risk of sounding repetitive, I think it goes back again to, can you set yourself up for success by doing a great job on the front end of your development? So as you go in and you design great products and you start doing your FMEAs and your hazard analysis, you kind of know what you're looking for. You might have put this data into the database and you're tracking it in quality, some of the things we talked about. So all good stuff, but start to understand those metrics that make sense. When is something actionable? When do I want to start raising flags? Understanding that, so as the data is rolling in, you actually have a little bit of a backstop to understand. You're not making this decision on the fly. One of the things we've noticed is that if you try to make that decision on the fly and it's under a lot of duress or a lot of emotion, you have a tendency of making the best decision you can at the time, but you're not really set up for that best success for making the best decision. And I think that's something that's kind of a key piece. Another piece that I just absolutely firmly believe in, especially at a corporation, is the cross-functional alignment of a decision team. Product safety often, and in our business, in our company, we chair the safety committee. We drive the meetings, we do a lot of stuff, but we do not make unilateral safety decisions for companies. We collect information from our engineers, from our service folks, the salespeople, the marketers. All these things come in and it helps you get a little different flavor, maybe break down a bias you might have on certain information, give you insight into a customer's mindset, their use patterns, maybe why they're doing things. We might have actually marketed a product a certain way and taught them that. Maybe we look at our technical literature, like to Ken's point, is did we actually teach that? Is that advocacy we've given them and did they follow it? And we might have given them bad information. Or was there confusion in what we thought we were saying and it turned out that's not what they heard? So some of these cross-functional things go a long way. And I think it's just really a key piece to set your team up ahead of time and be ready to go. And as we go through that, we really do want to do a great job trying to pull all the data together. And, Jason brought it up that you have a tendency of maybe having multiple databases. We're living on spreadsheets and you got a lot of it. It's there. You got to take the time, pull it together, put it in a place, get a dashboard developed the best you can, but get something visible that folks can look at. If we're going to sit and look at 100,000 line spreadsheets of data, you're not going to get what you need out of it. We got to start to coalesce that into something that we can then look at and approve or look at it and compare it to our metrics, compare it to our expectations. And can you take those important data and do you get alignment across your team as what those data mean? Quality engineers think a little differently than design engineers and safety engineers, but everyone's got a valuable perspective and we need to pull those things into these decisions. I think another thing is it's probably maybe not as well understood by some organizations is your obligations. Do you have a reporting obligation after so many reports? Do you have to do something? And being prepared to meet those obligations will help you to start to put together some of these guidelines that you need, some of the triggers that you need to monitor so that you can make sure you're doing that. Your customers may have guidelines. You might have a contractual obligation to them to let them know things. So there's a lot of things there that, again, when you understand these things, and it's funny because I think, we want to talk about how to make a decision. And I think one of the things that helps is when you do all these things in the front end and you pre-work, the process actually becomes a little bit, I want to say simple, but it gets a lot more manageable because you're going through and you're deliberately looking at things and you're spending time and you're weighing values and you're making sure you're taking all things into account instead of, again, trying to make this up and then possibly inadvertently forgetting something. So really the decision process, as far as I see it, really comes down to getting yourself established and being ready to make a decision. If someone called me with a fatality, are we ready to take that, put it into the investigative team, collect the things, and then go forward? And then as we get to the end, and I'm going to tie up in a sec here, Ken, again, understanding your options. Do I want to just call customers and tell them to stop if they call me? Do I want to write a note? Do I want to go to the website? Do we want to do an informal type of thing where we go get them back on our own? Do we want to put a formal recall? Do we need, there's a lot of things out there that are available to us. So as you look at that classic severity and occurrence type things, what's the right I mean, if I'm killing people, I certainly don't want to wait for them to call me to say, hey, I'm going to go fix it. That seems like a bad idea. If I'm pinching fingers and irritating people, we might have a little different understanding of what to do there. But knowing that we're only pinching fingers and it's not a pinched finger that could have been an amputation or a lost limb becomes a really important piece of the investigation. Okay, Ken, I think I got you 5.5 minutes.
Again, we're going to post the material that hopefully will fill in some of the gaps here. There's just no way to do this. We could spend an entire hour on call centers alone. Let me mention one thing, and then I'll take a couple of these questions. How you document the process is really important. Understand, many of you may already understand, all the call center information, all of the safety committee meetings are discoverable in product liability litigation, are not privileged, and the CPSC may ask for them, particularly if there's a timeliness investigation. So how your call center people document this, how you explain, so somebody can remember 5 years ago, when the customer said traumatic brain injury, it really wasn't. It was just that they had a headache. How can we differentiate this stuff? So how this stuff is documented, how it's written down, and ultimately how it could be provided to the CPSC or to a plaintiff in a lawsuit is really important. So you got to have a process for that and some training about how to write this and how not to write it. So once a lawsuit starts, or there could be a lawsuit, you can then claim attorney-client privilege over it. So if I'm hiring Jason to help me give legal advice on whether we have a reportable item or whether we need to recall the product or make product safety improvements or whatever, I have Jason send me I'm hiring him, he sends me the report, and if I need to claim privilege over it in anticipation of litigation and helping me give legal advice. Many times if the report says that there's no safety issue and we do report to the CPSC or the CPSC is investigating, I would provide that report to the CPSC or in a product liability case to show that we made the right decision. So, but if you don't involve a lawyer in somewhere in that process, you're not going to be able to claim privilege over any of these documents. So you got to be really careful how you write them. This is just ripe for writing stuff that is going to be used against you, and some crafty plaintiff's lawyer or the CPSC will misinterpret everything you write and try to show that you were a careless company that didn't care about safety. All right, just quickly in 2 minutes here. In the investigation, as Jason said, you want to get the product back if you can. You can't get Larry's not going to get his appliances sent back to him. So photos, videos by the consumer can be helpful. You've got to decide whether that's adequate or whether you can send somebody out, or whether you need to send somebody out to the site. So now with FaceTime and various video capabilities, you could actually have a consumer walk through and show you what they did, how they turned on the appliance, what they were doing when it happened. So you can do a variety of things that don't require you to actually physically be there. So you got to think about it and develop what you want to do. Second question, when do you stop sales of the product in lieu while you're doing this investigation? Well, that is a really big issue. And the company has to decide, are you going to stop sales? Are you going to embargo inventory in your warehouse or in the retailer's warehouse? That's a pretty critical decision. And the question is, what should be the trigger to block stock and sales? Well, I'm a lawyer, so I get to say this. It depends. It's a big it depends. We don't want to do this, but you've got to make a decision as to future risk. And if you have accidents, if you continue to sell the product during your investigation and have accidents and lawsuits are filed, just take out your checkbook, because that's going to be what they're going to try to show is that you knew accidents were happening, you knew about the safety problem, you didn't do anything about it, and they're going to start talking about punitive damages. So it's a critical decision, but I can't give you the trigger to do it other than to say, be real careful about it. One last thing on that. If you report or identify a safety issue, but you don't have a fix, when do you communicate, and you can communicate to consumers, when do you communicate to consumers and basically say, hey, there's a safety problem, we're working on a fix, stop using your product until we come up with a fix. That is the worst case scenario you would ever have, and we have that in the auto industry, and you really want to avoid that. But it's possible that that's going to happen because you either haven't developed a fix or you've developed a fix, but it's going to take you months to get the replacement part produced and out and available for consumers. Certainly the Takata airbag situation is a good example of that. That's gone on for years. So sales stop and stop use letters to customers are huge, but the plaintiff's attorney and the CPSC are going to use your inaction, and whatever you do, they're going to criticize what you did or didn't do. So you got to be thinking about that and justify your actions. Last question is about retailers. Retailers usually just they don't want to mess around. They want to just give the money back or give them a new product. And then because they know you're just going to reimburse them. So you've got to work with your retail distribution chain to when do you want them to send the claim to you? When are they handling it? I mean, this is, you're not just doing this by yourself. There may be claims coming into the retail call centers or the retail stores. So you got to deal with them. And so the procedures we've been talking about need to be established also for retailers too. And again, no right or wrong way to do it. This is why this whole area is so tough. It is so dependent on the risk and the consequences and the severity, the number of products being sold, the staff that you have, the staff a retailer has, for example. And it's a good process, though, for you to think through this whole thing and be able to justify your actions and show that you were a good and careful company that really wanted to know what's going on, did your best to get the information, analyze it, and make an appropriate and fast decision on what to do and what not to do, what's not necessary to do. So you'll be challenged on whatever you do, so you can't agonize over it, but you just got to do what you think is right for the consumers and for the company. So with that said, I'm talking real fast, I'm sorry about that. Thank you all, Larry, Mark, Jason, appreciate it. Thank you all for attending. Take a look at the site, and hopefully there'll be some more information, and we'll maybe try to do another one of the webinars and drill down on some of these in a little bit more detail. I think it'd be kind of fun to have a call center case study and have here are the questions that consumers can throw out to you, and how do you respond, and what do you do with the information? I think that'd be kind of fun to do. So we'll see if we get time to do that this year or early next year. So thank you all for attending. We really appreciate it, and have a nice afternoon. Okay, Loudon, thank you.
Bye, guys.
Everybody.
Thank you.